Let's make a swim cover-up perfect for summer. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today this is going to be our last summer sewing video of 2023, and we are making a swim cover-up. So this is actually half like a swim cover-up of how I'm making it, but I am also doing a pattern review for this, as this came from the Polkadot Chair website. She made the very similar swimsuit cover-up, and there's a whole tutorial on it, so I'm going to be following her steps the best that I can. And the reason I say that is I technically do not have enough fabric based on what she had used for her measurements. The length of mine is probably about 2 to 3 inches shorter, and then the main issue is the width. So the swimsuit cover-up pattern that she had, it was much wider, so you actually got these long sleeves that kind of went with it, more like to your elbows. As you will see with mine only goes to 27 inches compared to what was needed, so it is going to be a little shorter and more of kind of like a short sleeve cover up. That'll be more just your very upper portion of your arms. The first step though was, after I had it all nice and folded, I did need to cut down that long edge, and then I'm just going to be sewing up right along the short edge, as this is where the neck hole will eventually be going. So I have these with right sides together, and I'm just going to take a straight seam all the way across. Now this was very quick and easy to do. I backstitched both at the beginning and then the end, and then I used my serger to trim it up so it'd be nice and neat. Now this is where things start to get a little more tricky, as she does have a pattern piece that's available for download. I thought I did everything correctly through her website so that I could get that pattern piece, and it just did not work. So I did sort of have to adjust how I thought the neckline should be. When you look at the pictures of what she has online versus what I did, it is much lower V than what she had on hers. So I think that some of my proportions did get a little off when I was trying to figure it out just from using what her images were. But overall, I cut out what I thought was going to be the V at the bottom, and then I measured evenly from either side so that I could then create this circle neckline effect. And then this was what I would then be cutting to get the neck hole for the swimsuit cover-up. I don't think it's really a problem that it is super large. As you'll see when it goes on the dress form, it is a little bigger, just because it's something you quickly throw on, you take off. You don't need to have this be like really complicated or intricate, but this is what it looks like when I use my own measurements and tried to base it off the proportions of her images instead of using the pattern piece. So now with that done, it was time to take a rolled hem on either side of this cover up, as that is the way that we are going to be finishing off our edges with this. Now I have a whole video up on rolled hem, so I'm not going to get too in depth with how I did this, but basically I just folded the fabric over twice for this rolled hem and then took the seam. Then it was time to create the drawstring enclosure for where the drawstring is going to be going. So I pinned this so that I would know, and then I used one of these like water and air soluble markers and just marked it all the way through on the front of my dress. As you can see that this is still the right side is facing out. I more just marked it so that it would allow me to know where the middle is going to be for where I'm going to be adding the buttonholes. So we're going to be adding 2 buttonholes, and this is how the drawstring is going to be coming through our cover up. So I just marked 2 from where the point was. I probably should have measured this out, but it did turn out fine doing it this way. After I marked it with the pen, I did then use a pin to mark either one so that if the pen did start to lighten up at all, I would still be able to see it. Now it's time to pin together how the cover up was going to be sewn on the sides. Now if you were actually using the correct measurements, this would have been a much more drastic looking effect, to the idea that this would have been much more curved than what mine ended up being. So I did use, you can see my cushion there since I don't have a curved ruler, just to try to get that overall curved look to it. But now it was time to start adding the buttonholes and then sewing up the edges. So the buttonholes, again, that's so that we're able to add a drawstring. They're looking good. And then I just took a straight seam on either side, so following the marking that I had done and then going all the way down so that I could close off the sides of the swimsuit cover up. Technically the wrong sides of the fabric are together here, and then that's why we took that rolled hem, so that you don't see any raw edges and everything looks nice and neat. Then I just repeated this for the second side to close up the dress. So just as a quick status update, this is what the dress currently looks like. The sides are looking really nice. Everything came together well. Then we have our 2 buttonholes here, and now it is time to open those up. So I just used a seam ripper to very carefully open them up, being sure that, you know, like when you did those buttonholes, it only should have gone through that one piece of material, not both the front and the back. And now it is time to make the enclosure for our drawstring. So for this, you use bias tape, and you just pin the bias tape along where that line was that you had made before. And then you only do this, so one for the front, and then you repeat that exact same process for the back. So as you can see, there is a little gap between the front and the back bias tape for this, but it's not going to be an issue because the drawstring is just going to be going all the way around. And then at the edges of my bias tape, I did fold it in ever so slightly so that it would have a nice and neat look as well, and I didn't have to worry about raw edges of that. Now it was just time to take a straight seam on both the top of the bias tape as well as the bottom of the bias tape, and then do that for both the front and the back pieces. Now for the drawstring, I didn't have any on hand, so what I ended up doing was I took yarn and I braided it. And this is what I used for my drawstring. I think it turned out really well, and the blue really matches the fabric nicely. And then when you've finished going through the front and you're going to the back, you know, you just, as very similar to how you would do any other drawstring, you just push it through. Then I just continued adding the drawstring to the dress so that it would have that nice cinched in effect and it wouldn't be so large. And then when I got to the end, I was just able to completely pull it through, and this is what the dress currently looks like. So the drawstring is in, we have the sides done, so what it's time to do now is finish up the neckline, and then we just have that hem to do at the very bottom of the dress. For the neckline, we are again using bias tape as per the instructions, and I found this again very easy to do, very simple. The only color I had on hand was pink, but I think it offered like a really fun play on all the blues and greens. So I just went through, I opened my bias tape, and now I'm going to be sewing in that first little groove, and I'm just going to be taking a seam all the way around. Once I do that, I'm then going to be folding over the bias tape, and as you can see here, we have that nice and neat hem. Now, one way you could have done this is then understitched that bias tape with that part of the material that had the raw edge. I went ahead though, and I pinned it all down, and I just top stitched everything. I wanted to give it a nice little detail on the outside, but you don't have to do it that way. There's multiple ways you can do bias tape. This is what the dress currently looks like, and I think it's looking really good. So now it's just time to go around the bottom and do a rolled hem, which again, I'm not going to get into too much detail since I do have a whole other video up, but basically what I did was I folded my fabric once over, took a seam, then I'm going to trim off some of that extra material, and then I'm just going to be folding it over again so I can get that really nice and thin rolled hem look instead of having a more bulky rolled hem. After I did that though, the dress was then complete. So we have all of our hems done, we have the sides done, everything came together really well. Overall, I think the only hiccup with this free pattern was trying to get the actual pattern piece itself. I think I was able to make it work, especially since you're normally going to be wearing a bathing suit underneath of this. The super low V isn't too big of an issue. But this was the last sewing pattern for the summer of 2023. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see next.